Welcome back to Crystal Clear! I'm ARTWITHKODA, and the conclusion of Steven Universe Future left us on an optimistic note for Steven and his journey of self-discovery. The one-of-a-kind half-gem, half-human being obtained a better idea of how to navigate through mental health, with the proper accommodations being made with the revelation that he's in therapy, alongside departing from Beach City in order to continue growing as he enters adulthood. Now, when I heard Steven confirm he had a therapist in the series finale, I squealed and exclaimed, yes! We didn't film our reactions and post them on the channel due to, you guessed it, COVID. We couldn't be at the Roundtable office. We've all been working from home. It just felt off without the complete Roundtable crew there in person. Being with my friends creates more excitement within me, so I didn't want to force any reactions for the end, but I digress. I believe therapy is an amazing first step for Steven, but we need to keep in mind it's just that, a first step. Steven is in a very particular and delicate situation where he could, I would argue very quickly, end up in the wrong state of mind or feel as if his life is in danger due to the weight of his sheer existence. These factors lean more external than internal, circumstances out of his control, such as uncomfortable new situations he'll endure while traveling the world and eventually deciding where he'll settle down, and straight up assault from anyone with a bone to pick, such as the likes of Bluebird Azorite, or whoever else in the galaxy that could project their issues onto this boy. These scenarios could quickly trigger Steven's pink powers and transformations. Steven, just like the rest of us, is susceptible to bad days and relapse, and if not properly prepared for physically alongside mentally, things could spiral quickly. Keep in mind, subduing Monster Steven was just resolving his episode, that particular meltdown, which was obviously and ideally a lot more severe than other meltdowns he could be prone to in the future, but it did not resolve Steven's problems as a whole. And because of that, there are a few more things Steven could do to properly prepare for distant flare-ups and ideally having a legitimate grasp on his transformation and controlling his powers. We know these powers can be controlled or repressed, as Pink Diamond evidently was able to completely hide these abilities from Pearl, which would include the insane scarring experience of the Gem War, but I don't think this should be something Steven avoids using at all costs, but truly taming it. Jasper arguably had the right idea with the wrong intentions, wanting Steven to master his powers in order to get a good fight out of him, instead of for his own sanity and everyone's safety. It's okay, Jasper, I still love you a lot. Thank you, Crewniverse, for actually having her try to become a good person by the end. But of course, that's what happens when Steven comes to someone who refuses to work on themselves for guidance. But assistance from those who have worked on themselves and continue to, those who he knows are reliable and there for him, I think that would yield a very different kind of diamond transformation for Steven that allows him to better control his powers. So let's dive into all of that. How Steven can still seek out assistance from his support system, with each of them contributing something special that can aid Steven as he improves his mental health and turn his diamond abilities into something he isn't afraid of. And the first point I want to touch is actually, what would a controlled diamond form look like? I'll reiterate, because Steven's physical form is a reflection of how he feels, his initial diamond transformation, which I titled Court Steven in my form breakdown, was a result of extensive training with Jasper and being surrounded only by her for 3 days straight. Her influence on Steven ran deep. And Helpful Steven, or Diamond Steven, was the result of Steven feeling like a diamond. And although I do simplify the umbrella of these pink transformations as just subcategories under a diamond transformation, I don't think Steven would once again grow to the scale of his mother or even Jasper. Although I do very much enjoy that aspect, amplified by beginning to watch Hunter x Hunter around the time of these episodes airing, Steven would physically reflect the positive influences in his life, due to the nature of his swelling and how it ceases in this pink state once Steven increases in scale. I do believe having a better grip on things would enable Steven to grow to a different size. Something tall, but not as large as Jasper or any of the diamonds. I think around the height of Lars would be appropriate. Ideally, the adjustment in size would help with the swelling and shows that he's taking after a positive influence. Who doesn't love Lars? Post off colors. Lars of the Star. You know what? just don't answer that question. I think he would still pack some muscle, but retain that signature Steven chubbiness, similar to Helpful Diamond Steven, and I imagine his hair would take the shape of how it would occasionally look in fragments, a distinct blend of the Steven bumps and pink diamond tufts of hair. Now I understand since I'm promoting positive influences having a direct effect on Steven's transformations, having any resemblance to his mother may seem a bit weird considering how Steven feels about her, but this entire umbrella of transformation stem from the fact that his diamond powers are accommodating his anxieties and trauma. He physically has a diamond's gemstone, so any trait seeping through is an inevitability. And as for the scale of his powers, while obviously the strength of his powers would fluctuate with his emotions, I imagine a Steven with a good grip on things would be able to keep his powers at bay within reason. For example, he'd actually be able to control his super speed, not speeding up when he feels anxious. I really want to focus on Steven's battle strategy, but that's going to come back up later on. I briefly want to touch on Steven's therapy just to give a good idea of what that could entail in case anyone doesn't have the clearest idea. Now make no mistake, not seeing Steven in therapy was a calculated decision. When asked in an interview with Vulture on if she considered showing Steven in therapy, Rebecca Sugar stated, "I really did not want to show that. I really wanted the characters to finally have privacy. As an audience watching the show, and as us writing it, we're complicit in Steven feeling exposed. The idea of being in that space and watching him unpack it felt like a violation of his privacy. I wanted you to know that he was getting that help and that he was taking steps to live the life he wanted to live, but I wanted him to be able to do it without the pressure of being the show's protagonist anymore." I can get behind Sugar's reasoning for not showing Steven in therapy, yet if you're unfamiliar with the ins and outs of therapy and find yourself just a little bit curious of what Steven's up to, how exactly therapy is giving him the help he needs, I'm just going to pull a direct quote to avoid as much misinformation as possible. Post-traumatic stress disorder therapy has 3 main goals: improve your symptoms, teach you skills to deal with said symptoms, and restore your self-esteem. Most PTSD therapies fall under the umbrella of cognitive behavioral therapy. The idea is to change the thought patterns that are disturbing your life. This might happen through talking about your trauma or concentrating on where your fears come from. The point of bringing this up is to clarify that within therapy, Steven is working on getting his symptoms treated. Symptoms in this case being the flare-ups of his diamond powers. Taking things outside of therapy, however, I think a good place to start with controlling his flare-ups, controlling his powers, and controlling his transformation lies with something he needs when no one else is around. Steven is going to live on his own now, even with the warp pad. Unless he really hits it off of someone and gets a roommate, he's going to be in his lonesome. Yet I believe there's something Steven has access to that none of us have the pleasure of taking advantage of, is the wonderful but daunting world of Rose's room. Unfortunately, the series made its exit before we got an answer of how gem rooms were made, but it doesn't negate the fact that their creation is still possible. And in theory, they could have the materials necessary, or worst case scenario, hit up the diamonds in order to amass said materials. And within Steven's apartment or house or wherever he decides to live, they install his equivalent of Rose's room. And I know that sounds like it could be a little frightening, especially with the scenarios we can conjure up all stir crazy in quarantine. We would have to trust that Steven would use this for the betterment of his mental health and not self-sabotage, recreating the toxic individuals that have plagued his life. Instead, Steven could use this room to relax. If he's alone, I wouldn't want Steven to envision Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl hanging out with him, at least not directly, but if he's just reminiscing and projects himself with the gems from the good old days, I think it would be beneficial and help calm him down. Or maybe, should this room be a little bit more updated and can handle a full-on simulation of a city, Steven could simply unwind as he puts himself on top of Empire City, similar to him and Lapis in the episode Can't Go Back, hanging out in Pink Diamond's moonbase. Hell, while we're at it, why not just add one of those orbs within Steven's living quarters? Give this man some perks! But aside from aiding his anxiety, I do believe Steven should continue training, just not with a mentor like Jasper. Steven remarked that letting his anger out on trees did feel good, and that's because it was a form of stress release. I just believe Steven had the wrong outlet, which is why in Rose's room, he could train by himself, assuming the room is diamond power-proof, because the last thing Steven wants is accidentally unleashing a whale that destroys the entire thing. But he could project the perfect targets that he knows can't actually be hurt. They're not real, and he doesn't even have to make them gems. They can be an enemy from a video game or movie or a cartoon, TV show that he's he's watched, and he can make them as strong as he wants. Going off the idea of upgraded technology, Steven could form a running track in the room, keeping up his speed. Anytime he needs to let frustration out or just sharpen his skills, his own Rose's room would greatly come in handy. But again, Steven is aware that he has a support system that is there for him, and Sugar stated in an interview that he would visit home often. And I believe there are ways all the crystal gems and other allies can assist Steven in both his recovery and control of his powers. And I'm actually going to categorize Pearl with the latter, because let's say Steven wants to spar, but he needs a little bit more of a challenge. Well, he warps over to the temple, hits up Pearl, they pop over to the Sky Arena, and Pearl gives Steven a great sparring session with the use of her Hollow Pearls. AI Steven knows can be rough and tough, that will push Steven to the limit and can truly put his abilities to the test. I think Steven would find himself under pressure, not wanting to succumb to the adrenaline rush that his power can provide, especially with Pearl watching, and I think at times it could even become a bit much. But the important thing is that before push even comes to shove, Pearl and the rest of the gems would be there ready to support Steven, letting him know it's okay. He thought he wanted to spar, but now that he's in the zone, he's not really feeling up to it. That's okay. He can step back and take a break. But I believe if he opened up to the gems during the events of Future sooner, training with the Hollow Pearls could have been a great alternative to training with Jasper in the first place. Staying on track with training, moving away from Pearl, with Amethyst's weapon being a whip and all, I think it makes sense that she could train alongside Steven when it comes to maintaining accuracy, similar to when Jasper was throwing boulders at Steven. Amethyst setting up an obstacle course with the help of any uncorrupted gem of your choice, with said obstacles requiring Steven to defend and maneuver around projectiles, utilizing his diamond plates when necessary. And when they're feeling really good, they of course can fuse into Smokey and truly take on this obstacle course together. With Garnet, I feel as if her assistance would be with a different kind of training, one that we've already seen her instruct in the original series: meditation. Helping Steven control all the thoughts in his mind, help him ease his anxiety, and supply him with even more tactics to navigate through his feelings. Yeah, I think wisdom is always going to be Garnet's thing, but we see she's all into meditation and yoga at Little Homeschool, and if she can find a routine that aids Steven more than anyone, especially when it comes to dealing with pink flare-ups, she'd give it her all to teach. Next up is good old Lapis Lazuli, and I believe Wise So Blue gave us an excellent way she can help Steven control his powers without having him actually engage in physical combat or exert much physical energy at all, and that is through Meep Morp. It seems as if out of all the crystal gems, art is really Lapis's thing. They all can get in touch with their inner Picasso, but Lapis has it down packed. Like, we saw Steven's farewell gift to her. That's not an art hoe, that's Galileo. It appears as if Steven has always retained his own interest in art, but I think Lapis could really connect with him through the medium in a way no one else can. As we know, Lapis endured her own hardships and struggles with mental health. Lapis made it abundantly clear that art, more than anything, is what got her out of her rough patch. But the most interesting thing is that Lapis can use her manipulation over water to craft brand new pieces of art never before seen, erecting breathtaking pieces out of mud. This is very beneficial to Steven because it reminds me of his diamond plates and polygonal structures. You know, like he created a few, slapped on some spikes and shattered Jasper. Yeah, I think that especially is a situation Steven would want to avoid repeating at all costs. And I think a great way to do that is for him to use this ability, but instead of whipping up the death penalty, he follows Lapis's example and pretty much makes pink glowing origami, combining that expression of art with his abilities to create peaceful, feel-good objects and have those innocent expressions of art become synonymous with that ability, removing the dark undertones that are now associated with the power. Moving on to Peridot, as suggested by Bizzerneth, I can see Peridot simply helping Steven with organization and management, developing a regimen that can help Steven stay on top of his day-to-day duties. It's not always easy living on your own and being responsible for yourself and your own mental health, and I think if Peridot provided the assistance for Steven to just stay on track, it would go a long way. Sure, it looked like he had no problem sticking to daily habits in the beginning of the future, but that's only a few months in. What about further down the road, once Steven really gets busy again? If he gets overwhelmed, Peridot is the best to come in and help him sort everything out. And this brings us to the homie, Bismuth. the queen of all inventions, the jack of all trades. This is gonna get a little fanficky, but this series has shown they can do whatever they want, so honestly, who gives a fuck?
Warning.
I could see Bismuth managing to give Steven his equivalent of a gem weapon upgrade by creating some sort of object, some sort of device. For simplicity's sake, something like a ring or a pair of rings that Steven could put on both hands that recognizes high emotions and thus the trigger of his pink powers. And the purpose of the rings would be to help Steven show restraint. As long as he has the ring on, he's able to better manage any brewing anger. So if he's glowing pink and balling up his fist, Steven's about to jump into the ring. Bismuth's ring would auto-enable bubble boxing gloves, and the ring can prevent him from adding spikes to any pre-existing ability, such as his bubbles or plates. It would function as a cap on Steven's powers, allowing them to only do so much or go so far. But of course, if Steven removes the rings, he would have to be even more mindful of said power. Also, thank you to Mike at SU for brainstorming on that idea. Amazing boy, amazing artist, give him social media clout. But moving away from the crystal gems, or at least those who are actually gems, I want to set my sights on Lars. We know from the future that him and Steven are gonna hang out. It sounds like they've already spoken, maybe even hung out once before, in that gap between him leaving at the end of Little Graduation and Steven preparing to move out in the beginning of the future. What you put in your body is very important, and I think one thing Steven will pick up on living on his own is that it can quickly become a big hassle cooking your own meals and staying on top of that. Sometimes you gotta do takeout, sometimes you don't even know what you want to cook, but you're getting tired of the same old, and Steven's a vegetarian. Sure, he broke that diet when things were getting rough, but now that he's much more well composed, I think he would return to that diet. But keeping track and making sure Steven's consistently eating good meals that not only taste good, but are good for his body and mental health, I could see Lars whipping up a meal plan for Steven. Maybe every Sunday to prepare for the week, Steven and Lars indulge in some meal prep, Lars throwing in alien vegetables and fruit and other spices and stuff he picked up from other planets, and providing Steven with the recipes and resources needed for him to cook more and more of these meals on his own. After Lars, we have Mr. Universe, Greg, who I believe would keep up the father-son chats with Steven. Not much else would change, but picking up from Mr. Universe, considering Steven actually heeded Greg's advice about seeing the world for himself and traveling somewhere new, I think Greg could continue to show Steven influential music from his early years. Hey Stubal, I showed you David Bowie, but how about some Del the Funky Homo Sapien? Shout out to my Craig of the Creek fans. And last but not least, with Connie, considering we found out in the finale that she still hasn't settled on a school, but she's touring them, I believe she can go sightseeing with Steven, which sounds like it's already the plan as they're going to meet up when Connie is touring schools, but I believe seeing new places with one another would be good for both themselves and their ever-growing relationship. Influential, formative, and romantic memories that will last for years upon years. And generally, I feel as if quality time with friends old and new is what will really give Steven through the hardest of times. Whether if it's binging new episodes of the awful Camp Pining Hearts reboot with Peridot, bonding with new anime and manga with Lapis, video games with Amethyst, and movie nights with the Crystal Gems and Greg. All of this can go a very long way and see positive effects in all aspects of Steven's life. But bringing it back to the transformation, I want to close this out with a discussion of how Steven could actually apply all of this in battle. How can he stay calm and avoid repeating what happened to Jasper? Well, all of the aforementioned can help him hold a grip on everything, or at the very least be a bit more proficient with his powers. I believe backing this up with actual strategy is what matters the most. Steven is more of a defensive fighter, and I don't think he wants to be offensive anytime soon. But when push comes to shove, if again, Bluebird pulls up and she's roped in Holly Blue Agate, and I don't know, Demantoid, I think this would cause an obvious flare-up with Steven, especially if he's isolated, and I think his best bet with a middle ground execution would be to disable his opponents without harming them, before they even get the chance of laying a finger on him. One move I can definitely see come in handy, whether if it's against a sentient opponent or let's say a lingering corrupted gem that they missed, was the use of the diamond plates against Jasper, distributing 4 plates and pushing them against Jasper, efficiently making her immobile. This is a tactic Steven should use on all of his opponents hands down. Not repeating what follows, but if someone is charging after him, bust out the plates and defuse the situation once they're no longer in a position where they can hurt him. He doesn't have to do this with just the plates either. Thinking about Steven's diamond shield, how he kinda used a diamond bubble to capture a fish, or a dome to subconsciously trap his friends, I can't see why Steven couldn't do this this with an opponent, maybe use the diamond origami to encase opponents inside a mold of their own body, or using said diamond origami to create projectiles that won't harm his opponents, but severely limit their senses, such as a block of birds that can get all up in an opponent's face, blocking their sight, and then relentlessly singing to cloud their line of hearing. Essentially, Steven's strategy should be to neutralize the situation as quickly as possible without having to get too hands-on and keep himself safe. If push comes to shove and he's not able to provide that, then again, he could always enable his boxing bubble gloves and quickly fight his way out until his opponents have no fight left. Steven is a strong individual and is looking like he's the strongest diamond, so I don't have my doubts that he could quickly neutralize the situation before it gets to any dangerous point. But as always, these were all my long-winded thoughts and I want to hear yours. What do you think? Do you believe Steven can gain control of his diamond transformation? If so, how do you think he could go about it? How do you think his allies could support him? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below or tweet your thoughts at Roundtable. And for more of my own thoughts, you can find me at ARTWITHKODA. We're also on Instagram. Special thanks to ARTWITHKODA for creating an awesome thumbnail. For more of his wonderful art, you can find him on Tumblr and Instagram at ARTWITHKODA and subscribe to his YouTube channel. Link down below in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please throw it a like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you for watching and I hope you have an awesome day. ARTWITHKODA signing out.